Whiteout conditions on the highway. Miraculously, no one was seriously injured. And
that this government and this minister has lied to the families of this province.
The feud over autism funding intensifies after emails allegedly show autism providers were instructed to halt services and keep quiet. Plus,
the nerdy girls out there who hide behind their sketchbooks, don't be afraid to tell your stories to the world.
A Toronto director told her story to the world and snapped up one of Hollywood's greatest prizes, the long-awaited win for the animated short that's already inspiring a generation. Good evening, I'm Chris Glover, but we begin tonight with developing news, the results of 3 federal by-elections. One in our backyard, York Simcoe, just north of the city. It's a conservative stronghold that we project has gone that way again tonight. Adrian Chung has been looking into the results and joins us now live. So, Adrian, this was not a seat that we expected to switch hands, and it hasn't.
Certainly not a big surprise here, Chris. The riding of York Simcoe has voted Conservative since 2004. Outgoing MP Peter Van Loan, who won 5 terms, has retired, and in comes new MP Scott Davidson. Now, the numbers are still rolling in, but CBC News is projecting a Conservative win. The latest numbers show Davidson winning by about 20 percentage points over the Liberal Party candidate. And all day we've heard that voter turnout may be low with bad winter conditions in York Simcoe, but still, voters came out by the thousands and they have overwhelmingly voted in the latest Tory. Let's hear from him now.
It might have been my name on the ballot, but together we kept this riding Tory blue, and together we sent a message to Justin Trudeau that his days are numbered as Prime Minister.
So, Adrian, York Simcoe is not normally a race that we watch too closely in a federal election, but because of some different power plays in this situation and the newly ousted Maxime Bernier from the Conservative fold, how did his new party, the People Party of Canada, how did their candidate do tonight?
Well, that's why this riding, York Simcoe, carries so much more significance this time around. The People's Party of Canada is a right-of-centre party, and especially in a federal election year, it's seen as a possible challenger for some Conservative votes in 905 ridings. But Conservatives are likely breathing a sigh of relief tonight. The latest numbers show the People's Party pulling in under 2% of the vote, and CBC's poll analyst Eric Grenier says 5% would have been considered a strong showing for the party. So for now, York Simcoe is still firmly blue. Chris?
All right. Well, and with the federal election not too far off, there's lots for us to chew on tonight. Thanks for this. Turning to another developing story this evening, a man in his 60s was rushed to hospital tonight after being struck by a vehicle in the West End. It happened near Finch Avenue West and Weston Road just before 8. Emergency crews arrived to find the victim unconscious but breathing. Paramedics assessed his injuries as serious, then rushed him to a local trauma center. The driver of the vehicle stayed on scene, and the westbound lane of Finch Avenue is blocked at Pearldale Avenue. That's just the latest incident in a day filled with collisions in the GTA. Highway 400 has reopened tonight after a massive pileup near Barrie. At least 70 vehicles plowed into each other in whiteout conditions. There were so many mangled vehicles, it took most of the day to pry them apart. Thankfully, only 12 people were taken to hospital, all of them with minor injuries. Ellie Chiasson has the details.
This is going to be a bit of a mess getting this cleaned up.
Cars crumpled like accordions. It's nearly impossible to tell where or which cars were involved in the initial crash that caused the rest to pile on. First responders helped people out of the windows. They kept warm in buses. So we just got to the scene here, and immediately you're hit with the smell of spilled fuel. We know that about 500 liters of diesel was on the road when this crash happened. Amazingly and luckily, none of these vehicles caught fire, especially since a tanker truck was also caught up in it. It's actually such a mess right now. Initially, we heard there were about 50 cars involved in this pileup, but now we've learned there's about 70. We arrive to a tow truck tango. It's taken at least 6 hours to clear.
I've been doing this for a while, and I've never seen an accident this bad.
Trucks jackknifed, cars in the ditch, road signs taken down with them.
We have wind, blowing snow, drifting snow, whiteout conditions, and that's the problem. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, drivers need to adjust. Now remember, the weather does not cause crashes, but drivers who drive too fast in those conditions that do cause these crashes.
For a crash this big, it's a wonder how people weren't more seriously injured, and a chilling lesson in winter driving.
If you can't stop within the distance that you can see, or driving beyond the distance of your headlights, you're driving too fast.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Barrie.
The most hazardous file on Premier Doug Ford's desk right now is undoubtedly autism funding reform. The controversy turned a new uneasy page today after new emails appeared to show autism providers were instructed to halt services and keep quiet about it. Lisa Shing explains.
This government and this minister has lied to the families of this province.
It was this remark that got Children and Youth Services critic Monique Taylor booted from the House.
You have to leave the chamber for the day.
This scuffle is just the latest development in the controversy over the way the government is funding autism services. This all has to do with emails forwarded to media outlets appearing to show internal communications from at least 2 different regional autism service providers telling staff not to give any more services to families. This memo from last October says, "We have been asked to pause on making calls to families regarding services until further notice. Any appointments currently in progress will continue as normal. And we will not tell families directly there will be no service offer. Please do not share this information with others." Critics say that directive came from Lisa MacLeod and her ministry, telling staff to freeze the waitlist for treatment and not tell parents.
We know and we've seen the documents.
Today, MacLeod denied it multiple times.
Well, no, we've never indicated that there would be a freeze. My deputy and I, neither of us have ever indicated that there should be a freeze. That's simply not true.
Thank you. Parents don't believe it.
He's a danger to himself, and I have concerns that if he leaves the house, he may get into trouble.
Natalie Vieira, whose son has severe autism, is still waiting for therapy. She's the latest parent among dozens who has demanded an explanation at Queen's Park in the last week.
It's been very frustrating to get any answers. I don't know what's going to happen moving forward.
The PC's plan is to eliminate the wait list for treatment by giving money directly to families and capping the amount children are eligible for. Many of those families say it doesn't take into mind varying needs on the autism spectrum. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Time now for a first look at your weather forecast with Colette Kennedy after another blustery day. And that's where you want to start. Colette?
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I thought we'd take a look at some of these extreme wind gusts of what we have seen courtesy of Environment Canada. Toronto, this is at Pearson. Also Hamilton, almost 90 kilometers an hour. At Billy Bishop, different story, over 90. Then we've got Windsor, 96 kilometers an hour, the wind gusts there. Chatham-Kent, but you know, not only Chatham-Kent, Waterloo as well. And those of you watching from St. Catharines, 98 kilometers an hour. And Port Colborne, okay, taking the cake at almost 130 kilometer an hour. Yes, these were damaging winds for sure. They've been easing up a little bit. That gives us improvement as we go into tomorrow, but we're still going to see kind of a mix of sun and cloud and could be some flurries in the morning hours. Then as we head into Wednesday, the next system is going to be approaching with some snow. Looks like we could see some accumulations. I'm going to go into that in a little more detail, but later in the show, I just want to let you know, first of all, that overnight tonight, -10, but feeling close to -20 with some flurries. Morning flurries possible tomorrow, otherwise kind of a mix of sun and cloud, -7. That's about 7 degrees below where we should be at this time of year. So we are into a colder spell. Coming up later, I'll also talk about when things might warm up again. Chris?
All right, looking forward to that. Thanks, Colette. Ontario is set to introduce legislation tomorrow to transform the healthcare system in the province. Health Minister Christine Elliott insists it won't be the same as a leaked version the NDP revealed last month. That leaked bill showed plans for a super agency that would roll a number of health agencies into one. At the time, the NDP said language in the leaked version would allow for more privatization. But Elliott denies this and says Ontarians will not have to pay out of pocket for more services. A new training course is being rolled out at some Ontario universities about how to deal with sex assault survivors.
So what am I supposed to do now? How are you dressed? What?
The training for staff and faculty consists of videos like that, showing a wide range of scenarios. They give examples of supportive and unsupportive responses to sex assault victims. It was developed over 3 years by researchers at Western University who consulted with survivors. Legislation brought in by the Ontario Liberal government in 2016 mandated that all universities and colleges develop their own sex assault policies. So far, about a dozen schools have signed on for the training, including York and U of T. All right, coming up, cannabis is legal, but selling weed-infused food is still against the law. What some of the country's top chefs think about the future of mixing marijuana with high cuisine. That's next. Cannabis edibles will be legal to sell later this year, and some Canadian chefs can't wait. Weed-infused drinks and food ranked as the top up-and-coming food trends of 2019 in a recent survey of chefs. I went to Restaurants Canada show to see what foodies are preparing. Even if it's a bit bumpy sometimes. Did you order this?
No, I did not.
No, yeah, I think he's got the wrong table.
Yes.
Chefs are always looking to the future for the next hot food trend.
Everywhere we go, people want plant-based.
Plant-based burgers are among the hottest foods right now, but in a survey by Restaurants Canada, weed-infused beverages and food are number 1 and 2 on the list of what's next.
And the up-and-comers could be potentially the next hot trends at restaurants.
Are people surprised to come into your area here and see robots and weed?
Yeah, 100% they are. I am surprised still.
Chef Charlotte Langley curated the restaurant of the future for Restaurants Canada.
By showcasing these recipes that are standardized recipes, and we're working with all of our cannabis partners, it's a really good starting point to start the education and the conversation of cannabis use at home.
What do you think the top trends are for 2019?
I'm sure cannabis is right up there.
This Mississauga couple is interested in possible experimentation with cannabis in their cheesecakes.
We love this show. It's like Disneyland for us. And we come here to do Some exploration.
Toronto's Board of Health says don't explore cannabis in gummy bears and candies. Today, it accepted a recommendation to urge the federal government to ban certain edibles that appeal to kids. But some entrepreneurs aren't digesting the news well.
And if you don't include all forms of edibles, then you're going to get into the problem where certain forms of edibles will just be on the black market. So it's kind of strengthening the black market in a way when really you want to have full product diversity.
I'm nervous. I'm a parent, but I'm also a businessman, so I sit on the fence there of like, do I want this or do I not want this?
The Bald Baker keeps his line of sweets on trend. Right now, that means vegan and gluten-free, but he's already practicing with pot.
I think it all comes down to the packaging and the way you actually sell your product. If it's properly positioned as, an adult edible, not a kid's edible, then I think it's fine.
He says once the cannabis craze is over,
there's a diabetes epidemic that people are starting to realize.
Sugar reduction is the next up-and-coming trend he's watching.
Can't be 55 grams, can't be 60.
And speaking of how top-of-mind cannabis is for these chefs, tomorrow afternoon, the first cannabis-themed workshop will take place at the annual Restaurants Canada show. The TDSB has done an about-face on a decision to ban 21 kids at a Toronto daycare from starting junior kindergarten. Last week, parents at Ord Street Public School were left scrambling to find a new school for their kids after they were told the TDSB needed to make space for children of foreign doctors and researchers. But it changed its position after CBC Toronto contacted the board. Farah Morelli has more.
Zip, zip, zip. Uh-oh. Are you ready?
This is part of Jean Martin's daily routine, picking up 4-year-old Mabel from Ord Street Public School.
Did you have a good day today?
Martin's hope was that her younger daughter at the school's daycare would be able to join Mabel at the same school. But last week, she was told that won't happen.
Very, very frustrating. We have a routine right now. There is no consultation from the school at all, and a decision was made unilaterally.
They were heartbroken. They were in disbelief.
Ord Daycare says the TDSB broke the news 2 Fridays ago that 21 kids who don't live in the neighborhood but were planning to start junior kindergarten at Ord in September need to make other plans because the board needs a space for the children of overseas medical fellows.
And so they're not sure what the number of those doctors are, but that's how or why they want to hold back on our out-of-district children.
The TDSB told CBC News this is just an issue of overcapacity. It initially issued a statement which said in part, the school building is full due to rising enrollment among students from within the boundary. In the past, out-of-area children attending the Ord daycare were allowed to enroll at Ord Street Public School, but now that the school is full, there is no longer space for these students. Then late today, a change in tune.
After CBC News reached out to the TDSB, it contacted the daycare's board to set up a meeting for today. The TDSB now says it will allow those 21 students to start junior kindergarten this fall. It says as of fall 2020, it won't be welcoming any new out-of-district students.
And while that's welcome news for many, it still means Martin will have to look for other options. Her daughter wasn't slated to start JK until 2020.
If I move Mabel to a different school, that's another challenge. So we have a lot of decisions to make.
But for now, she has another year to decide. Farah Morelli, CBC News, Toronto.
Gusty winds and now more snow on the way. Yikes. Is there any relief in sight? Colette Kennedy is back with your long-range weather forecast coming up next. The Toronto Maple Leafs have picked up forward Nick Petan from the Winnipeg Jets, sending fourth liner Par Lindholm the other way. It was the only move and hardly a blockbuster for the Leafs on the NHL trade deadline. Coach Mike Babcock says many players are feeling relieved after a stressful few days of uncertainty leading up to the deadline. Another reason the players have to celebrate tonight, their big win against the Buffalo Sabres. The Leafs took it 5-3. Maybe it was just because temperatures were so mild on Sunday, but today felt pretty frigid. Colette Kennedy is back now with a look at the long-range forecast. Colette?
Thanks, Chris. Well, it's definitely a colder spell that we are into now. And, you know, sometimes it's nice to kind of take a look and check where should we be at this time of year, because our average high has been creeping up. It's now over the freezing mark. This time of year, seasonal would be 0.2 degrees. All right, we would round that to 0, but still, we're running on the cool side. Below seasonal, our average low minus 8.5 will be cooler than that tonight, as you'll see in just a moment. By the way, the record snow, almost 40 centimeters there back in 1965. We have conditions tonight improving as those winds been backing off a little bit. So still some flurries out there, but not seeing all the blowing snow and the advisories and problems from earlier. But as we look ahead into Wednesday, for southwestern Ontario, we'll be seeing some light snow and then getting a little bit more into moderate snow coming through. That's Wednesday morning. Should be relatively dry. Could still be some flurries coming into the GTA, but more so it'll be midday, and for the afternoon commute, I think we'll see some wet roadways, and we may see some accumulations here, 5 to 8 centimeters, up to 10 possible. Have another look at that for you as it gets a little bit closer. So tomorrow we'll do another run and look at some of those accumulations. It moves through relatively quickly. By Wednesday night, you see southern Ontario clearing out. I do want to show you those winds. Northwesterly, we are still talking about some of the winds over 30 kilometers an hour, but that's way better than some of those 70, or as I was showing earlier in the show, nearly 130 kilometers an hour. So as we go through the day on Tuesday, you'll notice it. It's a northwesterly wind. It's going to give us a wind chill, but it's not going to be anything like the damaging winds we've seen. Wind chill minus 15, that's how it will actually feel, Windsor, even though it's minus 10 tonight with some flurry activity. Still the risk of that tomorrow, but I'd put it at about 30%. So minus 5 for your afternoon high. And as we're looking at what's going on for Toronto, it's minus 10 that we'll be seeing for the temperature, and we'll be looking at seeing about minus 7 for our high tomorrow. A little bit cooler for Markham. St. Catharines minus 6. The morning flurries are possible for you here. And then the 5-day forecast, I had mentioned trying to find a bit of a warm-up somewhere in here after the system on Wednesday, which, by the way, it will be a breezy day. Not like what we've just seen, but still breezy. As we go towards the end of the week, Friday coming up to 0, so up to seasonal, and a little bit above on Saturday, but then that will be a windier day. And then Saturday night into Sunday, behind that next system, cold air comes back in again. So it's not quite spring yet.
She went from Sheridan College all the way to Hollywood. Last night, Torontonian Domi Shi won an Academy Award for her animated short, Bao. And as Kelda Yoon tells us, her Oscar win is resonating with many Asian Canadians.
And the Oscar goes to Bao.
Taking the stage last night, Domi Shi was armed with a message.
To all of the nerdy girls out there who hide behind their sketchbooks, don't be afraid to tell your stories to the world.
Shi's short film is about a Chinese mother, an empty nester, who discovers joy and sorrow when a dumpling she makes comes to life. And it's set in Shi's hometown, Toronto. Domi Shi is a graduate of Sheridan College. At the school today, her banner raised high alongside other Oscar-winning alumni.
You're so happy for your students. You're happy for your students when they move on to anything good in life. But to see it sort of written so large as that, as being on stage at the Oscars and taking home that award.
Christina Liu is a current animation student at Sheridan. She says she hopes to one day tell similar stories.
As someone who is Asian Canadian, seeing like another Asian Canadian making, authentic stories that are different from what we currently see from Hollywood most of the time, it's really refreshing, and it's really nice just to see, like, you know what, we do exist and our stories are being heard.
For Isabel Koo, the film was an opportunity to bond with her mom.
I just knew that, it's about a Chinese immigrant mom, and I needed to watch it with my own. So we watched it together, and it was so moving and heartwarming. And growing up, I didn't really have any role models, like Chinese role models on screen. And I really loved that in Bao, they really normalized the Chinese culture. You see them going to the Chinese bakery, which I used to do when I was a kid.
I think the film does show what most Asian families go through.
Lillian Koo is a Sheridan graduate who now works in animation. She hopes Bao's success will encourage more Asian women to go into the arts and more parents to support the decision.
This is where, Domi shows, it can happen, and look what I've done. Like, she paved the way for a lot of Asians.
After the success of Bao, Domi Shi is now tapped to develop a feature film for Pixar. Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Congratulations to Domi. And that is our show for tonight. Have a great night.